I never seen a guy handle a big time loss with such class and character and humility as Errol Spence did.
This is Jonathan Agger, fifth Pro Boxing Fans, joined by journalist Dan Rafael. Crawford stopping Spence last week in Las Vegas. You were ringside for it. What did you make of what went down?
I thought it was a historic Hall of Fame performance from a great fighter who proved himself. If you didn't think Crawford was already a great fighter, yeah, I don't think he left any doubt for anybody by beating Errol. Not just winning the fight, that would have been enough, but to do it in the manner in which he did it in such a dominating, overwhelming fashion. It was one of the great masterclass type performances I have seen, toward the force as I have described it in all of my years of covering fights. I mean, it's up there with some of the greatest one-sided performances in a fight that was supposed to be competitive, or one guy was the underdog. In this case, Errol was a slight underdog, but still, I don't think anybody, even if you favored Crawford, like I picked Crawford to win the fight, I didn't think he was going to win, pretty much every single round, score 3 knockdowns and score a dominating knockout victory. I did not think that. You got to give him his credit. He fought a great fight, proved himself, whatever doubts there may have been from some. I never doubted his abilities. I mean, I watched what he did as a lightweight. I saw him do what he did as a junior welterweight. And my criticism was not even ever about Terence Crawford, the fighter. It was just the unfortunate situation that he found himself in through no fault of his own, that he couldn't get the bigger names in what was a very loaded weight class the way Errol was able to get them, because they were aligned with the same broadcaster and with the same promotional folks. When Top Rank had Terence Crawford, they tried to make these bigger fights many times, but they just didn't have the fighters that they could match him up with. And so they had to kind of do the best that they could. So he ends up fighting, some good names, the Kamir Khan, Kell Brook, guys like that, even Sean Porter, but they were obviously near the end of their careers. And not what they had great names, but they were not in any way close to what they were at their best, or when Errol Spence, fought, say, Kell Brook, or when he fought Sean Porter, for example. But Crawford, ripped that script up and did what he had to do. So it was a great performance. Like I said, Hall of Fame performance. And for my money, and I think a lot of people, all respect to Noya Inoue, who's a great fighter also, Terence Crawford's #1 pound for pound right now. I don't think there's any argument, period.
Errol Spence made no excuses, came to the post-fight press conference, spoke to the media. There was some suggestions afterwards, as this always goes. Errol Spence wasn't quite what he once was and things like that. What did you make specifically of Spence's performance? Because Crawford was excellent, but Spence didn't seem to really, show what he's shown throughout his career. Is that fair to say?
I think that's fair to say, but I'm not big on Monday morning quarterbacking. I mean, when he took the fight, everybody was happy and excited, thought it was going to be a highly competitive fight. I never talked to or heard from anybody, whoever they were picking to win, that thought it was going to be one-sided either way. Everybody thought this is a good, close, competitive fight. For me, I kept saying, all my years of covering boxing, it was probably the hardest pick I ever had to make, because I saw so much commonality between the two fighters in their abilities. Slightly different styles, fine, but I thought it was a really super hard fight to make a pick in. So again, yeah, Errol did not look good. Obviously, I do think he did struggle with the weight, but again, plenty of guys have had problems making weight, but they've still gone out there and performed. I guess it was a combination of a bad night, a bad style. You have that 1 hour period of time to be at your absolute best, and he didn't do it down that night. But I will say this, tip of the cap in a big way to Errol Spence, and I wrote a column about this because I was so impressed and heartened by the way he handled it. I never seen a guy handle a big time loss with such class and character and humility as Errol Spence did. I've known Errol since he turned pro. I've always had a friendly relationship with him when I've covered his events. I've always thought he's a good guy, and he lived up to that in the way he reacted and the way he acted in his post-fight comments. At that post-fight press conference, he was given any number of outs, any number of escape hatches, if you will, to make an excuse, to make an alibi. The questions that the reporters asked him were not out of line, but he took them all, and he wouldn't go there. He was asked, did you feel okay going into the ring on Saturday night? I was cool. I was good. Didn't take the bait. He had a swelling started around his eye. I want to say maybe in like the second round. he was asked, your eye was starting to swell. Did it give you problems? Could you see out of your eye? Could have used that as an alibi. No, my eye was good. I could see perfectly. No problem. He was asked about the weight. He didn't make any excuses. He says, look, I'm a grown man. I signed a contract to make 147. I made it. No excuses. Hats off to the champion. He just would not take the bait. He would not ruin Terence Crawford's moment. He would not act like a sore loser. He acted with class. It's a lesson that a lot of not just boxers, but a lot of athletes could watch his post-fight press conference, his conduct, listen to his post-fight interview with Jim Gray from Showtime in the ring. And that's the way you act when you lose a fight. I know it had to hurt. I actually asked him at the press conference, Jonathan, I said, how are you going to react to this? Is this the kind of loss where tomorrow morning you're going to wake up and just shake it off? Or are you going to stew and let this eat away? And it's going to be a little while till you come out of your malaise, let's say. And he laughed actually. And he's like, you know what? I'm not going to stew about it. And that was a reaction, I think. But, this is a kind of loss that hurts. This is not just any loss. This is a loss in like the biggest fight of the era, period. This is a big time historic championship fight for big stakes against another great fighter. And he wouldn't be human if it's not going to be real hurtful for him. And I thought Crawford, to his credit also, he acted like a real man also in the post fight. He didn't gloat about it. He gave respect to Errol Spence. You hear their banter. They caught it on the microphone in the ring when he went over to him after the fight and, thanked him for helping making a great event, because he understood that, of course, he had to come along for the fight because it takes two to tango. But without Errol Spence's constant pressing to try to get this done, for giving what he gave in the negotiations, the fight would not have happened. And Terence Crawford knew that. He appreciated it. And I just thought the way that both guys acted was so great. I just love that. I mean, we're all down for a good, pissing contest before the fight where they get on each other and maybe say some bad stuff. Maybe there's a physical thing. But these guys just acted like true professionals. And I was glad that even without the bullshit that you can engage in before a fight, they didn't have to do some fake fight at a press conference or anything like that, that the fight still did very well in terms of the fan reaction, commercial success of this event. Maybe it didn't do the million pay-per-view buys, but everybody made a shitload of money on this event. So good for them and for acting the way they did. And now I guess the question is, are we going to see a rematch? Because Errol does have that option to exercise if he so desires in the next few weeks to make it official.
Well, that's what I was just going to ask you quickly. In the post-fight press conference, he did indicate that he would look to exercise the rematch clause. I guess things are always said in the heat of the moment. What did you make of that? And also, were you surprised by Stephen A. Smith's comments suggesting that Spence should consider retiring after, I guess, the one-sided performance? And I think he described it as a beatdown.
Well, it was a beatdown. As far as the question of whether Errol will exercise the contract, right to the rematch, you are right when you say sometimes when guys say stuff in the heat of the moment right after a fight, you kind of got to let it. You can't really take it too much to heart. And yes, they say it and they're responsible for their words, but plenty of times that changes. You know what I'm saying? Like, as one recent example, Canelo Alvarez, after he lost to Bivol, I'm going to exercise my rematch right. Well, he didn't. And that was the right decision, in my opinion, for him not to exercise the rematch right. If you go back years and years ago, as a very famous example, after Lennox Lewis pummeled and destroyed Mike Tyson, Mike actually had the right to a rematch. He didn't exercise that. He didn't want to take that beating again. And so Errol came to the post-fight press conference and also in the ring post-fight and said, yes, I'm going to do the fight. He hopes it can be at 154, which I guess would be the option of the winner, which was Crawford, to determine whether you do the fight at welterweight or at junior middleweight. So Errol has, I think it was 30 days from the time of the fight to actually make that decision official. So it's what he said in the immediate aftermath is one thing. What the lawyers and what the official contract says in terms of whether you'll exercise that right or not, that's a different matter. So it's not entirely positive that he will take the rematch. If he does, he does. He's going to want to try to reverse that decision. Personally, I've got nothing but love for Errol Spence. I don't really see what the difference would be, whether it's at 47 or 54. It's not like suddenly if it's at 54, it's some great advantage for Spence. Yes, he won't struggle with the weight as much, but so Crawford also was not exactly making 147 so easy either. As far as Stephen A. Smith's comments, look, I have a lot of respect for Stephen A. Smith. I was his colleague at ESPN for 15 years, probably, whatever it was. I like Stephen A. I've known Stephen A. for years. We are friendly. I've been on his radio program 1,000 times. I've been on his television program several times. and Steven is a legitimate boxing fan. So I just would say I would disagree with his assessment. Stephen A's job is to have the hot take, and he's great at it. And that's why he's as famous and as popular as he is, and why he makes the kind of money he does, because he's able to articulate those sorts of thoughts, in the heat of the moment after a big event, and does it really well. I just don't necessarily agree with that, and that's fine. I'm not saying Errol shouldn't retire, but I'm not the kind of guy that would say after one loss, getting knocked down for the first time in your career, and you did it against a great fighter, that suddenly you can't fight anymore and you should retire. I just think that's maybe jumping the gun a little bit.
Final question. Shakur Stevenson, obviously a good friend of Terence Crawford, was asked about a fight between Crawford and Canelo. I know Crawford's dismissed it. Some people would say, he could have just said yes because it's a massive payday, but he has dismissed the fight. People were talking about Spence against Canelo for years. So what would you think about a potential matchup between Crawford and Canelo?
I mean, it depends on what the weight is, to be quite honest. I mean, that's a fantasy fight. We all can sit around and think about, great fighters from one weight class, a couple of weight classes heavier, how would that play out? It's happened occasionally where you've seen like a Manny Pacquiao rise 2 weight classes and fight Oscar De La Hoya. Granted, Oscar was at the end of his career. As it turned out, it was his last fight. But going into the fight, everybody made Oscar a huge favorite to beat Pacquiao. So you can never say never in the case of if it was a Crawford versus a Canelo. But again, what's the weight going to be? Crawford has said numerous times, like he feels like that at the top level, maybe he could be a 154-pounder. He's fought, already as a lightweight, already as a junior welterweight, now as a welterweight. 154 certainly seems doable. Middleweight, I don't know about that. Now, super middleweight, it's not like Canelo's going to fight him at 160. Canelo was shuffled between 168 and 175 for the last few years. So I mean, it's fun to think about, but it doesn't really seem like it's realistic to me at this point in time, particularly because, Crawford has maybe encumbered by a rematch, and, Canelo has another fight scheduled, and, who knows if there'd ever be an opportunity for them to get together. I sort of doubt it, but it is fun to think about the same way we could think about, any number of fights. Like I think about, how would certain guys in the smaller lights, like, okay, Inoue just had his big victory at 122 pounds. And I fantasize about what would it be like if Inoue was able to move up even a couple more divisions and fight somebody like Shakur Stevenson or Vasily Lomachenko or, whoever in that 126, 130 pound, 133 pound, 40, closer to lightweight, is that doable? I mean, those are fun fights to think about, but most likely they don't happen. And I don't think that Crawford and Canelo will ever get in the ring together.
We'll leave it at that. Dan Rafael, appreciate your time as always. Links will be in the description to both your Substack newsletter and your podcast, Big Fight Weekend. And hopefully we'll speak again soon. Take care.
Appreciate it, Jonathan. Thanks a lot.